Hey folks, so I'm working on my 1995 Mercury here. Had a few issues with it electrically, got those fixed up, but now I'm having an issue with my water pump. I'm not getting any water out of my telltale down here. So I'll show you real quick. I don't want to run it for too long, but I want to show you what happens if you're not getting any water. You see by now, you should have water coming out of here. There is no water coming out of my telltale here. And like I said, I don't want to run it for too long without that impeller moving water through my power head. So we're going to take off our cowl here, and the water will come through your impeller up here. It'll come into your power head here. It'll come out through this hose. Now, there's a few things you can check out here on what to do on this motor, so follow me. Let's fix a motor. Okay folks, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove your starter to get to the clip for your lower unit. So I have a 10mm socket here, so let's take this starter motor off here. Make sure your battery's disconnected, so that way you don't short anything out. I have mine set up on a toggle system, so oh yeah, and you may have to pull this choke lever out to get to that bolt on the starter. If I can get it on there. There we go. And then you're just going to remove this back bolt here. And you're going to remove this outside bolt. Okay, these are the two bolts here. And then your starter motor will come out. And then on the bottom of your starter here, I believe that is a 9mm, maybe an 8. Okay, and then you're going to need to get an 8mm on there. Okay, and then you're taking your nut off of here. And then you remove your wire for your starter, and there's your starter is off. I always put the nut back on the starter here. I just want to show you that real quick, just so you don't lose any parts. Okay, so now the part that you're looking for here is way down here at the bottom. Okay folks, so as you can see, this is our next part that we have to remove in order to get our shift rod from behind here. Now this is our shift linkage here, and you need to get the rod free from there so that whenever you slide your lower unit off, everything will slide out of there. So I use a 1/4 inch, I think it's a 14-inch extension, because the end of it will fit right there on that little top, this little, see that little tab there, and then you can just pop it up, and you see this little clip holds everything in place. So you pull this up a little bit, and then it has to come out of there. So I use a screwdriver. You might get some shadow in here, but you see how that slides right out. And then I can move the camera for 1 second, and then I'll reach down in here with my big fat fingers. Okay, and this is what it looks like. This is what you're looking for. It's just a little pin that goes through that the linkage system on your gear shifter, and it connects to your shift rod, what actually turns your prop, puts you in neutral or reverse, because this has a tiller switch on it. It doesn't have the shifter on the side, like it says 95 Mercury. Okay, so now that we've got that, let me tilt this motor up and I'll show you the next steps. Okay folks, so there's 3 bolts here. There's one right here. There's 13 millimeter. You're gonna have to use a wrench because it's hard to get a socket in here, especially when this bolt starts to back out. So you have to use a 13 millimeter. And there's a bolt right up here. There's one exactly the same opposite side of this bolt, and that will drop your lower unit after you have removed the shift rod stop. Okay folks, so the next step we have to do is remove this shift rod stopper. And what it does is whenever you shift your motor into reverse, you see this drops down here and it lets this little lever here relax. So if your motor won't kick up in the air, like it won't go up in the air, you can't raise it up if that is not pushing up on this little lever here. So when you put it into neutral, you see that it lifts it up just a little bit, and then when you put it into drive, so if you hit anything with your motor, it's free to go up and down. So we'll go ahead and get that off of there. That's going to take, I'll put it back in neutral. What that's going to take is you're going to take a 8 millimeter here. So there's a nut on one side and there is a bolt head on the opposite side of this. So you're just going to take this off. One little key note here is you can see right here on this there's like a little oil stain. That's where you have to make sure when you reinstall this that it goes back up to that little oil line, because you want this a little bit depressed when you're in neutral so you can still tilt your engine up and down. So, oops, excuse me. So let's put this back on. We'll take this thing all the way off because it's actually 3 pieces here. I want to show you, or 4 pieces actually if you include the bolt and the nut. So let's see here. Okay, so now you've got your nylock nut. I'm going to show you these pieces here. Okay, so now you've got your nylock nut here. And I like to put my finger on that. And then you see this comes apart in 2 pieces. And then you have your nylock nut there. And then you see you have these 3 pieces left. So one quick thing here to remember, that when you put this back together, it's going to go back like this. It's going to go right back on top of that, just like that. And then that rub spot, of course, is going to be where this lever, where it rests on this lever. So make sure, I make sure that I put my bolt back through there. And then I want to put my nut right back on it, just so that way I'm not losing any parts there. So okay, well, let me get to the next step in removing this lower unit. Okay folks, so now that we have these 3 bolts removed, now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the lower unit. So it just pulls right out just like this. Now pay attention to the orientation of your shift rod here. It has to come up and bend out. So let's put this on the table and let's see what's wrong with the impeller here. Okay folks, so I just built this little stand here because I left my propeller on, and it's just a couple 2x4s. I put a couple screws here just to hold the lower unit here. You don't want, I put a little hand clamp on here, just kind of press it. You don't want to put this in a vise or anything because all this is aluminum and you'll bend it, but this will work because it's softer wood. I just put a clamp on here just to hold things. It still moves a little bit, but at least you can work on it standing up. So what we're going to do is, these are 10 millimeter bolts. We're going to take these bolts off here and let's see what is the problem with our impeller. So this little tube just sets on here. Okay, so you can just set that out of the way. I like to take these off. I loosen them up opposite just because I don't want anything to go wrong here. So you're just loosening up your bolts here. Okay, so now that we have our bolts free, we can remove this top cover, and that is going to expose our impeller. So let's pull this off of here. Should be kind of a snug fit. Okay, so I'm looking at my impeller here, and it's a little looks decent. Now when you pull this impeller off of there, there is a little key right here. Let me swing this around so that you can see it. There's a little key right here that you need to save. Don't lose that, because that holds your impeller in place. So we're going to slide our impeller all the way off here and then do a quick inspection. And you can see some of these little tabs were they're a little bent in there, and they shouldn't be bent in there. So I'm assuming that this is the reason why I'm not getting, oops, and that's a little plastic washer that you don't want to lose. This little plastic washer goes on top of the impeller here, so just hang on to that. But you can see a couple of these tabs are bent, so I think we're going to have to replace this impeller. Okay folks, so it was getting a little warm out here. I take my sweatshirt off, but I'm going to show you here. This was the old impeller. It had a couple of these were bent almost at a 90 degrees, you saw before, which it's probably just cheapy rubber, or it happened to be just old, so we're replacing that. And the part number you're going to want here, I'll pull this card out of here so you can see it a little bit better. But you see the part number that they've changed that to for Mercury. I have the manual and stuff, and it showed a different part number, but that's the new part number for that impeller on this. So you can see it's got the inside here. It's got a little better than this impeller here. This has got a little, looks like a better quality fiberglass center, to where this one had a plastic one. Now you can see the key slots in these. It wasn't really chewed up or anything like that, so I don't think that this was skipping. I think that the problem was these couple paddles that were bent over too much just wasn't creating a good seal in there. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take one of your little plastic washers and slide it right down over top of this here. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put this key in. Now it's on the other side here, but the key goes flat against your shaft here, and it has the little nub on it, as you can see right there, that actually goes into your impeller. So I'm just explaining that a little bit more because it's on the back side here, because I want it to stay there when I slide this impeller down. And then you're just going to slide your impeller on here, watching that key just to make sure that you got it in the right spot, and then it will set right down on top of there like that. And then you take your other little plastic washer and put it down over top of that. Now when I do this, I take a rag or something. This is just a shop cloth, but I like to get a little bit of lithium grease on the rag. You don't need a ton of it on there, but I just put a little bit on here, you know, even just to rub it with my finger, just to give it a little bit more to hold or to slide across there. Now you don't want to gunk it up with grease or anything like that. I just put a little bit, and then I'll use the same rag on the inside of my housing here, And I'll just kind of wipe it just to give it a little bit of lubrication there. It doesn't need a bunch. Like I said, don't junk this up on there. Don't get too much on there. That's all you really need. So once you get your impeller on there, now, and you have your washer on top, you can take your cover again, and you can see how this will go on. So this will just go on like this. Now pay attention to the holes in your, all these holes will match up here. Let me show you real quick. Okay, so all these holes, like you have a little pin here that will go in this hole. There's a little pin here that's holding this top plate on with a washer under it, or gasket, I'm sorry. And then your 4 mounting holes. Just make sure when you put it on, you're putting it on the right way. If you put it on the wrong way, none of these little pegs here will match up for you. So evidently this part here on this cap goes towards the back of the motor, towards the prop, just for information's sake. But then you just slide that on there. Now if you notice, your impeller won't go on there. So what we need to do is I need to take this out of my little bracket and stand it up here. Let me adjust you here a little bit. Alright, we're going to set it back down in there. Okay, so I raised you up there a little bit because I want to show you we have to take this out of our little bracket that we made. Now you can see your impeller looks to be too big for your cover. Okay, it won't go down. It won't go down on there. But what you have to do is you have to press down on this, and then you have to turn your crankshaft. Turn it turn it clockwise, I'm sorry, until all of your paddles get down into that cap and that cap rests securely on there. So you're bending it into shape of what you need it to be. So you can see how this is kind of bending this a little bit. You want to make sure that as you're turning this, that you get that impeller inside that housing as you're turning it clockwise. It's not too difficult of a task, but sometimes it can be. But once you get it seated in there, give it a few more turns. I like to turn it a little bit more because those paddles actually seem like they want to lay flat whenever you put it in there. So the more you turn it, the more they'll stand up. Then I give it a little bit of a wiggle back and forth here. And then once you get it down in there, you can start installing your bolts once again. Right down through the housing. I'm just putting a couple in here because I don't want to release any pressure I have pushing down on this to keep that impeller inside of there. So let me start a couple of these bolts. Okay, so I'm going to put it back into my little homemade bracket here, and I have to actually turn my propeller so it will fit right in there. Okay, so let me lower you down, put this back together, and I'll show you what to do next. Okay folks, so we're going to put our other 2 bolts back in here. Then they just go in finger tight. Should go in almost all the way down to your washer that's on there. Then you're just going to put them all in. And then what I like to do is as I'm tightening these up, I want to get it down just to touch the plate. If you can't do it by hand, you can feel how tight you're putting it on there. So I like to get one side started to where it's touching, and you can feel this cap moving a little bit, so it's a slow process. Now once I get it a little tight there, I'm going to move opposite, just because that's what I like. I like to tighten things down the opposite direction like that, just to make sure everything is nice and snug on there and uniform. You can do it however you want, but this is just how I've done it in the past, and this is how I continue to do it. And then you come back over here and make sure these are down as far as you can get them. And then the same thing, opposite again. So let me put these bolts back together here, put this cap back on, and then I'll show you how to reinstall your lower unit. Okay folks, so we got our we got our cap put back on. Now, one important thing I want to mention to you here is that this little doodad here, I'm not even sure what this part's called, but it goes on, the larger end will go on the rubber hose on top of your cap first. And then it will actually go up into your motor. Here, let me show you what that looks like. And that little hose will go right onto that copper pipe right there. Now remember, I said the larger part goes on the cap for your impeller, and then you're going to slide that other end over top of that copper line right there. So with that in place and making sure the orientation is correct here for your gear shift shaft, you're just going to insert your lower unit back into the hole here. Now the tricky part is you have to kind of turn this shifter knob. Now don't turn it too much because it's threaded on there a certain way. So you actually want it to come through that little hole right there, because that's what you need to make sure that you have this going in the right spot. Okay, and as you come up there, you're going to have to kind of finagle this thing out of the way a little, and then you have to get it right back up under your motor there. And once you do, you can adjust this back down to where it was, making sure that this little filler tube is connecting to that rubber hose. Then you have to come up here. So really quick, folks, I hope you can see this. Right down here is where, oh, my flashlight moved. Okay, so right down here is where your shift rod linkage is. Remember, we took that little clip off of there. So you have to make sure that that shift rod goes in between. There's a little Y-shaped yoke there. You have to make sure that that goes in between there, so that way you can put your clip back in. Okay, folks, so we've got our shift linkage clip in there. Remember, I said I use this little 1/4-inch nut driver extension, or I'm sorry, it's a 1/4-inch extension. And then what you're going to want to do is just put your clip back on there. Love this extension because it's got a little pocket, and that's that. Now your shift linkage, as you can see down here, is running through that yoke on the shift linkage. Your shift rod, I mean, is in between your shift linkage, and now your clip is down. So that's it. After tightening up all your bolts, then that will be your final installation of your lower unit. Okay, folks, so now that we have our shift linkage hooked back up inside the motor, we need to put our shift lock stop on here. So what you do, remember, it's a 2-part deal, and like I said, that mine rubbed part is on here. So you're going to come on either side of this, and it just goes over the shaft. And remember, you mark the spot. Mine had my spot marked is right here. You really can't see it, but it's right there. So you just put your bolt back in here, and then you put your nut back on there. Remember, that's 8mm. So we'll put our wrench here. And then we just put it back on. Then we just put it back on. I put mine on just enough to where I can move it up and down a little bit if I need to. But I remember that it has to come up just a hair, so that way I could tilt my motor. And then you just want to go till it stops on there. So now my motor will tilt. Or if I'm in reverse now, it will not tilt up. That's the purpose of this little bracket right here, and that's what this thing does. because if you're in forward, you want that to be engaged, so if you hit a log or something, it will pop your motor up out of the water and you won't ruin a bunch of stuff. So that's the purpose of that little part right there. Okay, well, let's tighten down these other bolts here on our lower unit, and then we'll get this thing in the tub and get her running. Okay, and remember this is 13 millimeter here, and then we can get all these down to where we can tighten them up on there. Okay, folks, so we're all tightened up here. We're all sealed. We got the new. We're going to get our starter put back on here. If you took it off, you should know how to put it back on. But just in case you don't, and you're putting on a new starter possibly, you'll see one side's painted. The other one is bare metal by the bolts. The bare metal will go onto the mounting bracket. Remember, we put our nut on the bottom here. Now, when I do this, because the wires in here are so short, I want to make sure that the orientation when I get it down in there is the correct way, so that way I'm not pinching wires or twisting them. And then once you get to that point, and then you're going to tighten it up here with your 8 millimeter socket. And then I'm kind of holding this where I want the orientation to be as I tighten this up, because this wire will want to spin on you in there, and there's no need to really crank down. When it stops, it's done. So, and then we'll just get our starter motor in here again, making sure that everything is in line. I usually take my front bolt here and at least get a couple turns on it started, so that I can go around and get this other side, which I will do from the other side. Now I put my bolt into my socket and my extension there, just because it's kind of difficult, and then if you come around on the other side, you can see where you have to be to get this started. Okay, and then once you got it started, I just tighten it up by hand like this. Then I just come around here to the other side and do the same thing. Just tighten this up hand tight for the moment. Then you're going to get your ratchet. Okay, you're going to get your ratchet on there. And then you're doing the same thing. You're just tightening up till it stops. You're not going crazy with it, because you don't want to strip out any of these. You don't want to break off a bolt. So as soon as it stops, it's good. Okay. Well, now we got our starter back on. We've got our new impeller put in here, my Mercury 9.9. Let's drop her in a bucket and see if she'll run. Okay, folks, so we got our lower unit put back on. So I got us back here in our tub. We're going to start this up and make sure that our impeller replacement went as planned. So come over here. Now let's see. Yep, that's what you want to see right there. So that's good. That's an impeller replacement there on this 9.9 Mercury. Okay, folks, well, you see we got that fixed. That impeller was the issue there. Must have just been some cheaper plastic, or I'm sorry, cheaper rubber that it was made out of. So, all right, well, if you like this video, hit that like button and the subscribe button. And if you want to leave a comment and let me know if this video helped you, if you'd like to see more. So, catch you on the water the next time we got to fix this motor.